Welcome back to Enterprise Tuesday, third out of the 4 events that we have planned for the Lent term, coming virtually from the Entrepreneurship Center of the Judge Business School here at the University of Cambridge. And having dedicated the entire Lent Lent term discussions that we have around women entrepreneurs. We started with the inspiration. We're moved into motivation. And today we're going to be holding the potentially another yet challenging subject around the realization of success from women entrepreneurs. Before next week, we go into our last event for the Lent term and discuss how women entrepreneurs can get easier and better access to finance. I'm not supposed to hold too much of that floor, apart from welcoming everyone on board and hoping that you're going to be enjoying yet one more interesting discussion, as it usually happens, as it's the tradition from Enterprise Tuesday. And we're really happy that you have the opportunity to join us tonight. And apart from that, to have the privilege and honor to introduce the chair for the night. So the chair for today's event is Bina Mehta, somebody who has made the headlines recently by assuming a very important role and indicating how more women are getting to the top of larger organizations in more effective and more drastically better ways than in the past. Believe me, as a business academic, I'm really happy to see this happening because that's something that the business schools have been talking about for quite some time. Bina is somebody who is even more connected with Entrepreneurship Center. So it's double the honor to have one of our honorary fellows chairing one of the events. So many, many thanks, Bina, for that. She's the acting chair, as we know, according to the latest news, of the KPMG UK board, member and partner at KPMG and member of the board, somebody with extensive experience on growth, a topic that is very dear to my heart personally as an academic. So I'm looking forward to learning in that respect. And especially in international growth with clients, you name it, in terms of how big and diversified the clients that they are. And somebody who has been expressing her perspectives around growth and entrepreneurialism and women entrepreneurship quite a bit. So it's really a privilege to have her sort of chair the event tonight. Without further ado, I will pass the baton to Bina with once more many thanks about this. And I'm looking forward to yet another interesting discussion for Enterprise Tuesday. So Bina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stelios, for those very kind words. Look, tonight, as Stelios explained, is the third in a series of inspiration, motivation, and realization. So today it's all about how our amazing entrepreneurs that we've got here tonight have built their businesses, and for us to be able to fast forward some of the learnings that we can bring to you. We've got the experiences of COVID, we've got the current environment we're in, and actually agility and resilience is one of two of the really key factors that we see entrepreneurs having to demonstrate. And I think through the stories tonight, we'll hear that. I'm going to ask the panel shortly to introduce themselves, but we have got a real breadth of experience and perspectives today. We've got a formidable combination of serial entrepreneurs who have been through the entire life cycle to exit, with people with global perspectives, people that have got the investor perspective, and we have a rising star in deep tech. And I'm really, really proud that tonight we're actually bringing it all back to Cambridge because 2 of our entrepreneurs are alumni of the Judge Business School. So Addie and Aleksandra, I guess it's welcome back. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves shortly so you can actually hear their passion, their purpose firsthand, but I'm just going to give you my take on each of them, and it'll be a very short take. So I'm going to start with Addie. Addie is the CEO of Adelpha, a corporate finance boutique only founded in 2017, and in the last year alone they've advised on £250 million worth of transactions in the UK. I know Addie well because we both sit on the Council for Investing in Women Entrepreneurs, and you'll hear a little bit about that later. And that was set up by the Treasury and Bays in response to one of the biggest challenges: how do we get more money into female-led businesses? She's a change maker and advocate for female entrepreneurs and for women in finance. I'm going to move on to Aleksandra, co-founder of VividQ, a frontier tech company and winner of KPMG's Best British Tech Pioneer last year. And the business has grown from strength to strength, a rising star. She's been included in the Forbes 30 under 30 and many other lists that I could only wish for. So I'm looking forward to hear how she has become an incredible role model for budding entrepreneurs. Emma Emma is a legend, and I can only say one to have made history as the youngest person to have floated a company on the London Stock Exchange at the age of 29. She continues to amaze me with her grit and her passion and how she's grown her global software business, and how 50% of her most recent fundraise was from female investors. Not an easy task, I'm sure she'll share with us shortly. And the Tatler magazine describes her as a tech head who will be running the universe one day, and I can firmly believe that's likely to happen. And last but not least, Joanne, another serial entrepreneur who not is a serial entrepreneur, but actually runs 2 companies today. She also chairs the SME Council at CBI. So no wonder she's been recognised again by Innovate UK and the Women in FinTech Power List, because she is an innovator. And if it could even be possible, she has a passion for compliance, having spent many years in the financial services industry. So, I mean, you know, there's a lot of stories to come. Before we move on to the panel, I just wanted to make sure that you know that if you do have any questions this evening, can you please direct them to the Q&A box, and we'll make sure we get to them at the end. So I'm going to hand over to the panelists. Could you introduce yourself, please, and particularly focus on your journey as an entrepreneur, where you started, what was your passion, and maybe share 1 or 2 of the highs or lows that you've experienced. Can we start with Aleksandra, please?
Of course. Thank you so much, Bina, and hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure, especially as Bina mentioned. It very much feels like I was just sitting on the other side of the room when I was doing my master's at Cambridge Business School. So very, very honored to be here today. As Bina mentioned, I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer at VividQ, and VividQ is a deep tech software company with expertise in holographic display. So the technology that very clearly captures the imagination of everyone, but also puts a lot of pressure on the team and the co-founders to actually deliver on the promise. And this is something that we have been very much focusing on over those past couple of months since we started in 2017. When I was actually still doing my master's. So I'm not sure if I should be saying that, because apparently you're not supposed to be doing things on the side when you're doing your master's at Judge. But I was very lucky to meet the team already at that point and very much start that entrepreneurial journey, which I think I sometimes feel I'm still very close to zero on. So I'm definitely at the earlier stage of the hopefully exponential growth curve. But since 2017, we have made quite a lot of developments, I believe. We are employing 27 people today, which to me, I think is kind of the biggest motivation, but also the biggest pressure on a day-to-day basis, especially that our business is equity, is VC funded. So we rely on early stage and now growth investors to fund our business until we can bring our products to the market and become profitable. So it's been a very exciting journey, very challenging. We have raised over £8 million to date. And we're actually going through another funding round right now. I just came off 2 investment committees as part of that round. And it hasn't helped that obviously there was no women on any of the ICs that I joined. So I'm looking forward to hearing hopefully better experience from other panelists and how we can change that in the future.
Thank you, Alex. Can I turn to Emma? Can I turn to you next?
Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. Thank you for including me and for the very generous introduction, Bina. I'm going to ask you to be on all of my calls when I'm pitching to explain me who I am first. And to everybody else here, I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Very briefly, I have no master's degrees, and in fact, I was a poor attendee of a modern languages course at university, but I guess I started my entrepreneurial journey trading my student loans on the stock exchange whilst at university, along with a job at McDonald's. That's how I got ahead and had enough money to go on the odd occasional holiday, and things have since changed. As Bina mentioned, I IPO'd on the London Stock Exchange at 29. So the founder of Bumble is the first female billionairess and the youngest to do it in America. But actually, not that I've really said it out loud, I am the youngest female as far as I know. Briefly, what we do these days at Enterprise Alumni in a couple of sentences. So we're market leaders in the alumni management software space, and we power corporate alumni networks for many of the world's largest companies, essentially for competitive advantage. So we're a technology company that help large and medium-sized organizations to leverage this vast untapped pool of people as a source of recruitment, business development, marketing, and more. We have only been going a few years, but our customers are all large and global, from the tech giants like Google, X, and LinkedIn on the West Coast to Fortune 100 companies like Citi and Coca-Cola. But we've yet to power KPMG UK, but I think I know someone there that I'm going to hit up for a contract. A couple of things, I guess, about financing and investment. Just I'm sure we'll dig into it deeper. Three things. One, I like to put my money where my mouth is, and so does my co-founder. So in 2018, 2019, we set ourselves the goal of being the first software company of our size and scale to boast a gender-balanced shareholder structure. This has definitely been achieved in other sectors, and certainly in tech, I think, by companies who've raised a couple of $1 million, but we wanted to prove it was possible beyond seed stage when more money was at stake. I can tell you right now, it was the most emotionally, physically, professionally grueling process you could possibly imagine. I think I just took the view that I spent all this time on panels, constantly talking about the lack of investment in women, a perpetually female narrative, a perpetually negative narrative, and I should just go and change the statistics and just go sort this out for everybody, which is kind of my nature. And I think I figured the women of the world would rise up and say, this is brilliant, let me write you a check, even if it's not that big. But it was so hard. It was absolutely grueling. And, you know, Alex has mentioned she's got VC backers. I've got some VC funding in, but I had to be really creative with the types of investors I found in order to make that statistic, which has in some ways provided me with an advantage because it's an interesting narrative and I'm very proud of it. But also some disadvantages in that, you know, if you have a couple of big funds as your investors, they can constantly write you a couple of checks. It's much quicker to fundraise going forward. So pros and cons. But I mean, I guess, look, I think we're going to dig in later about money and funding, but I get asked constantly about women investors and how did I find them. It's really upsetting to think that it's so hard. I've learned a lot about why lots of women don't invest. I've learned a lot about how to get people to invest faster. And I really hope that in in a decade's time, this kind of conversation is completely defunct and no longer necessary, although I'm not convinced that's going to be the case. So that's a bit from me. Looking forward to hearing from everybody else.
Thank you, Emma. Addie, maybe I'll turn to you first. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you all very much for coming and having me. And again, thank you to Bina for the introduction. My journey. So I would normally describe myself as kind of EQ, IQ, 2.5 maths A levels, 2.5 humanities, came to Cambridge, read what was then SPS, and then moved to management studies. And within that, I did some of the engineering modules. I started in the city in investment banking and did 15 years at Goldman Sachs, mostly UBS and then Citigroup. And although I was always covering hedge funds and in a quite sort of people-facing role, that was still digesting a lot of numbers in terms of companies, forecast trading, algorithmic trading, stat arb, and helping to build sort of, we were hiring quants and maths Olympiads in the very early 2000s, which then became being called big data in the early 10s, and now it's just sort of AI, I guess. I was really happy in my job. I was lucky. I had good managers, good management, good structures and systems. It was all excellent. And then towards the end of the 2010s, I was sort of top-rated hedge fund sales trader in London, and lots of my godchildren's parents are hedge fund managers or principals. It was all great. Had my first child, got very bad postnatal depression, and that UBS were fantastic. And I went back, welcomed in, but it just changed my priorities in life. So I moved to Citigroup, which was really odd. You know, I was very happy at UBS, but I was being offered comfort and support at UBS and challenge and sort of adversity. And it says something about the person I am, I think, that I then moved to Citigroup. So my original plan in 2016, I felt like the world was quite grey. I always had this image of spitting image, the kind of image of John Major, just where he was grey and he ate grey peas and the room was grey. And I sort of felt that's where liquid markets were at the time. And suddenly I'd walk around Mayfair with these unbelievable deep tech companies and startup companies and SaaS companies. And I just felt like the world became Technicolor again. And so, I think we've probably done the best part of half a yard's worth of business in the last 4 years. We're very, very concentrated. We're very quality focused. We've probably done 80 transactions with 30 companies. Some of those companies have performed very, very well. But here's, I guess, the thing that for me is I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And I've always seen my career in sort of 5-year installments, not 20-year installments. I just thought, like, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? What do I need to do now to do it? And I've always rigorously focused on what am I good at? What do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? What am I not good at? Who do I like? How do I avoid people I don't like? How do I do something where I'm interested to talk about it on a Friday night, but also can breathe and be a human being outside of that? I never thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. There's a woman who I think is just phenomenal, who I admire hugely, who thinks very refreshingly about the business she's grown, which I think is excellent. But then suddenly this thing came along where I couldn't not do it. So I never quite resonate with people who go like, oh, I really want to set up a company, and I looked around until I finally found an idea. For me, I think growing a company is about seeing something which you can't possibly not do, that you have enormous conviction about, that stays true to your ethos and your ethics, and that you'll be happy to apply an unbelievable amount of energy and focus on. And there are good days and bad days, and you sort of have to roll with them. But it's sort of like what Weber said when I was reading him at Cambridge, if you know what's keeping you on the straight and narrow, then you know how to play the games to accelerate towards that. So that's my kind of tuppence worth.
Brilliant.
Joanne, can you? Yeah.
Sorry, Bina, we couldn't hear you. So, hi, I'm Joanne Smith. I'm the founder of 2 concurrent businesses. I started my first business about 20 years ago. It's called TCC, which is a tech-enabled services business. Very much involved in RegTech, as Addie just mentioned. I started the second business about 8 years ago, which is a tech business called Recordsure. Both are very, very different businesses in their makeup and shape. One is a people business supported by tech. One is a true tech business. Both have a huge opportunity to scale with challenges and opportunities in equal measure. I'm also the founder of, the chair of the CBI SME Council. I'm really passionate about SMEs generally. They make up 60% of the UK tax dollars. So that's really important that we have a voice in the SME market. And my background, by the way, is slightly different to everybody else's here on the panel. So I started work at 16, and I worked throughout for many years before I did an MBA. I was at KPMG actually, Bina. So I did an MBA at KPMG, and as part of that MBA, you had to study for 6 weeks straight at 18 hours a day, for 6.5 days a week, because there's blocks of time that you would go into study. And part of the offering was that we would do vanguard management, which was about how to think about new ways of doing management. And it made you meditate in class. Well, if you can imagine 6.5 days a week, 18 hours a day, the first thing you want to do when you meditate in class is to go to sleep. But they asked you, what were your goals, or your 3-month stretch goals and your 3-year stretch goals? And I didn't have any. I was working at KPMG. I was firmly on track to become a partner, but I didn't really have any goals. It was just happening around me. And so I committed, once I'd finished the MBA, to really sit down and give myself 6 weeks to think about the goals. What would I be doing in 3 months as a stretch? What would I be doing in 3 years? And 5 weeks and 6 days went by, and I thought, oh my God, I've missed my first goal of setting my goals. So I literally went to bed, woke up the next day, and decided to set up TCC. And 3 weeks later, I'd left KPMG, I moved to London, and got 2 clients, and the rest, they say, is history. And sometimes you have to make a move that quickly without the thought to be able to really give yourself that that shove, as it were, that you really need. So it's been ever so good, and I'm delighted to be here. And I could tell you lots of stories about things you should and shouldn't do, but I'm sure the panel are going to enlighten you as well.
Thank you, Joanne. So look, I wanted to give our entrepreneurs an opportunity to really share with you their backgrounds, and what's really clear is there is no such thing as a typical entrepreneur, whether it's backgrounds, whether it's personal journeys, professional journeys. But what is absolutely clear is there's a really clear why they do what they do. They do it because they have courage and they have conviction, as each of our entrepreneurs has shared with us today. And that is whether it's filling a gap, seeing a need, looking at an opportunity to scale, and actually wanting to make a difference in what we do. So thank you very much for sharing your journeys. There are 4 things that I hear entrepreneurs tell me that they struggle with as they're growing and as they scale. And they're the 3 accesses, which are access to finance, which a number of you have talked about in terms of the challenges. And that may be because you're a female entrepreneur, that may not be. So we'll explore that a bit in a minute. The second is access to talent, finding the right people, whether you need to have technical people with you, marketing people with you. How do you find the right people that fit you, your culture? The third access is around markets. And a number of you have got global businesses. How do you enter new markets? How do you partner with businesses? How do you collaborate so that you can achieve that scale? And then the fourth thing that we find, so along with the 3 accesses, is in all of that, you need governance and compliance, right? When you're building a business, you need to get the plumbing. I call it the plumbing, but it's getting all the bits right. And you're never going to have it perfect, but how do you have it perfect enough or good enough to keep moving? So I'd like to explore each of those areas. Maybe we'll get to see how we get to where we get to. But if I pick up on the one thing that most entrepreneurs really struggle with is finance. How do I go to raise money? Who do I go to speak to? How do I get their attention? And how have you actually landed that? So maybe if I start with Addie, only because we've been doing quite a lot in this space already. Can I start with you, Addie, to share your perspectives?
Yeah, how to raise money? Is that the question? Yeah, sure. I definitely think there are differences. I'm a big believer in unconscious bias, and I think there are differences in how people have been perceived, but I do think in general there are differences between how women try to raise money and men, and I do think there are lessons that can be learned from that. So for me, the easiest way to raise money in the first place is to be worthy of it and be investable, and really is the case that most female founders who present to me are not presenting as investable an opportunity to others. So just classically, the valuations I get presented with female-led companies are more likely to be higher based on earnings than male-led ones. Women are less likely to give up equity within their company. They're less likely to pay their boards. Yeah, this is a generalization, but I say that appreciating I might get kicked in the nuts for it a little bit, but it is the case. So for me, if I look at an investment opportunity, it really is a function of 5 things. It is, what price do I get in at? What price do I get out at? How long is it going to take me to get there? How much execution risk do I put around it? And how diluted am I going to get? And the first 2 things I can really sort of evaluate on that is the price I get in at, what I think the execution risk is, i.e. how quickly does this person execute and turn things around? How on top of their detail are they? And how diluted do I think I'm going to be? And so the first thing I'll say if you want to raise money is, get yourself straight on that. Be an investable company. Don't start with your background. Don't start on your personal background. Don't start on the background of the company. Just start with, you're going to put your money in here. I think you're going to get it here. This is what I think your return is going to be. This is what I think the dilution is going to be. Now should we go into the detail behind it? The second thing I think around that is preparation. Probably on balance, I think women prepare more, have more chats, and that's okay. We have a bit of an adage like ask for advice, get money, ask for money, get advice, which we can talk about more later. But 80% good enough for a fundraiser is not good enough. You want to be absolutely perfect within an inch of your life before you talk to your first investor. Don't take that first meeting with a friend of a friend until you are ready. So an investment presentation is like a CV for me. There is a point in your CV when no matter who you turn it to and ask for advice, there is no further improvements they give you. And what you actually want to get to the point, they go, that is a great CV. And if you're still getting conflicted advice, it's not good enough. If you're presenting on a deep tech company and some people are saying it's too complicated and some people are saying it's not detailed enough, that just means you're not doing it right. So for me, preparation is everything. If you prepare everything correctly on a presentation and your valuation's good and you have people who are giving you honest advice and you're asking for honest advice, you can do a raise extremely quickly. But if you haven't got all those things lined up first, you can be on the road for a very long time. You can do enormous reputational damage. You can do enormous damage to investors, and it can go very, very badly wrong, which kind of comes on to the other thing about feedback. I once worked for a guy who turned to me and said, I need to give you some feedback. Now don't cry. And I was like, and then I started crying because I just thought it was so unfair. I was like, I look for feedback, I ask for feedback, I act well on feedback. And my view on women is women, we all give ourselves such a hard time that there's nothing anyone can say to me that's worse than what I say to myself every night anyway. So I look for feedback, and when it's negative, I'm relieved. I'm like, God, is that the worst you can say to me? Because in my head, it's a lot worse. And women act on feedback, but we do get perceived as not being good at taking feedback. Now, if you're going out to raise money, that's actually a really important thing to understand about bias between men and women to women, which is you need to go out and not go, I've got this pitch, can I run it by you? And come across with a bit of a message whereby you would think, where someone else goes, I think she just wants me to say nice things. You actually turn out and go, I'm going out here with my reputation and I want to get funded. Can you rip me apart? That's the level of way that you need to ask that feedback until they've ripped you apart and then come back and said, this is brilliant and I want to invest, or I've got someone I want to put you in front of. It's not good enough.
Thank you, Addie, for that very open, honest and transparent reflection of the realities of what people experience. Emma, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your perspectives. I mean, you've shared some of your experience around the gender balance structure, but I know that, you've got some, experiences and tips that you might want to share with our audience this evening.
Sure. But I do want to pick up on one thing that Addie said, and I just want to say that I hate feedback that I don't like. A couple of things, I guess. Look, fundraising is very hard. It's also very hard to be generic with tips and advice on the basis that, depending on what stage you're at, what kind of size business, how you want to structure it, what country you're in, what your ambitions are, the size of the market and proposition. I mean, over time, one of the things I think I've learned, and certainly probably lots of others have, is it's quite, it's quite specific. It's sort of the chemistry that's required to engage people can be quite specific. So knowing your target audience is really important. For the purposes of today, I guess a few things. One is, like everything in life, build relationships before you need them. That's not to say that all the people that have funded me over the last 5 years are people that I tracked down over the last 15 previously on the basis that one day I'd want to ask for a check. But I do think that really matters. And for anybody who wants to immediately say, well, maybe you went to a fancy private school, or you come from a family that have tons of cash, or you've got this amazing network, or whatever else a perception might be. Just so we're clear, my first job was in Boots. My second job was in McDonald's. I don't come from family wealth. And, I went to a good private school that was sort of subsidized. But I think the relationships that I have today are mainly because I've been occasionally interesting to other people. So build relationships early. I'm still friends with some of the people that I was behind the counter with that were also at school from McDonald's, and some of them are running big businesses today. So the suggestion that you can't build a network wherever you are is one that I don't subscribe to, generally speaking. Second of all, I think find allies. When you have a goal, whether it's to raise money, whether it's to understand whether or not this is a business you can grow, find allies. It doesn't mean, as Addie says, going to everybody and asking for like some feedback or a bit of it. Everyone's got an opinion. Usually the people with the most time on their hands with an opinion, in my experience, that I don't want is a person that would give me the most feedback. But in any event, do find allies. And an ally is many things, but just because someone is a big name in a sector, or you can Google them and they seem to have a massive job at a huge company, not saying that's not someone you don't want as an ally, but I think personal chemistry, getting a sense that you can be honest and trusting somebody, find allies. And that is not just including with your board and decision making. That's not just a big name that you think you can find that sort of sounds quite good. I've certainly had bad experience with that myself. Two other things. One is an obvious thing probably, but warm introductions. It's always best to be introduced by somebody, whatever it's for, and fundraising is probably no different. And of course, sometimes if a fundraiser is done via a syndicate, someone can do those introductions for you or engage on your behalf with other people. But warm introductions as a starting point is always a good start. And to those who are studying right now and maybe are thinking about the earlier stages of fundraising and getting cracking, there is no, friends and family. I'm a terrible reader of Twitter late at night, and I read all these terrible articles that are so opinionated that make me angry. Friends and family doesn't necessarily mean your friends and family. Just so we're clear, my friends and family when I started included none of my friends and none of my family. It's just a loose term for people you know. Go to the people that know you for your first and early money and small checks. I went to my first boss I went to the CEO of my former competition. I went to people that knew me. And just so we're clear, when I started fundraising, I had no idea how to do it, was completely mortified. No one likes fundraising, but the people that know you are the most likely to back you. And once you've got some money from some people, then you're likely to find more. So, you know, I'm not intending to make it sound easy. It's all very hard. And just so I'm clear, every fundraise I do is hard, and I don't expect it to get any easier. There is no magic ingredient. But as ever, networks, warm introductions, allies can make things easier. And as Addie said, it helps to be investable, you know. So all great points. Look forward to everyone else's.
Thank you, Emma. And one of the things, yeah, I was going to come to you, Addie. Do you want to go next? Sorry, do you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Bina. Sorry. So right there from Emma. So right. There's three things on what she said that stood out a little bit. The first is, I think the stats at the moment are you're 14 more times more likely to get funding on warm introduction. So work out a way to get that warm introduction. That links onto a slightly different conversation that Bina and I were having recently, which is there is a way to approach people on LinkedIn and there is a way not to approach people on LinkedIn. So if you subscribe to Emma's view of like get those relationships lined up very early when you don't need them, find a way to add value to their day. It's funny how the backstretch comes back, but there is a way to connect to people early and there's a way not to do it. And strong views on that. And the third is, you're right, when people are raising money, and especially when female founders are raising money, it's unbelievable the people who come forward with opinions. And, you know, sometimes a founder will come to me. I had one last week. She was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And I was like, how many people have you spoken to? She's like 15. And these are the people. I was like, cool. And we went through all of them. They all had a conflict or they didn't know what they were talking about. So yeah, the one I particularly love is when someone's invested in your company already and then tells you to price it at like 20x your current ARR. And I'm like, you understand they're just marking up their book, right? So especially if it's actually an investor who's talking to you about valuation, until they're putting money in, they're talking out of their bum. You know, there's just, you know, the phrase that comes to man in the man's world is, you know, yeah, I think your company should be worth 40 million. I'm like, you know, and most men want to be more endowed. That's great. And that's a fact, but that's not the same thing as I think it's worth this. And I'm willing to put triple my investment in at that price. That's the sort of answer you need on pricing.
Thank you, Addie. I think I learnt a technical term there. But most importantly, Addie, I think you gave feedback to Emma that she actually smiled with, which was very positive feedback.
Yeah, I don't like any of that negative feedback that Addie was talking about. So definitely.
Look, I know, I think we've talked quite a lot about the challenges of fundraising, and it shouldn't really put people off at all. But Joanne and Aleksandra, I know that both of you in particular have looked at the US, and you've looked at, and Joanne, you in particular, when you did your last fundraise, you started pretty quickly for the next one after that, and with an eye on the future. Any tips or anything that you want to share at this point before I come to Alex?
Yeah, so having raised 14 million first time round, that was a great fundraise. But actually, just had brilliant advice from Emma and Addie actually, because I wish I'd known what they just said when I started this, and even now, even today, as I'm looking at what we do next. Look, female founders generally are historically underfunded. I think we all know that. Alison Rose has set up a fund that allows female founders to be funded up to, actually she's just increased it from 1 billion to 2 billion, which is great. So she's getting some of the challenges fixed for female founders and female entrepreneurs. But it's very fair to say that there's been studies proven. I think actually Dr. Dana Kanzier, you've probably heard about her, did this study whilst at Columbia University. She now works at the London Business School. But basically, what happens when you're going to pitch for investment is that you, the study that she's done is that men generally get asked promotion questions and women generally get asked prevention questions. And what that means is, when you ask a promotion question, it's generally a positive question, and will feature as a positive. So the men will genuinely answer in a positive way. Whereas if you ask a negative question, you tend to go on the back foot and will answer negatively. And so the challenge and the opportunity for female founders is you've got to spot when you're being asked a prevention question, and you've got to answer with a promotion answer. So I'll give a quick example. So I have done lots of fundraising now, and when men are asked about customers, they're asked about the acquisition of customers. when females are asked about customers, they're asked about the retention of customers. It's quite different. And so you have to then learn how to change that, that answer to say, well, actually, we can acquire customers in the following way. So it's all about the psychology of it all. But there is a way of being able to do it, and you've just got to learn the rules of engagement, because it's unconscious bias. It's not personal. It's not meant. It's just that you've just got to understand that this is how they've been brought up. And it's actually, even in the study that's occurred, it's women investors asking the same prevention and promotion questions as well. So it's not just a male-female thing. It's just that's inherently the way they've been taught how to invest. So I would say definitely learn the rules of engagement and follow what Emma and Addie have said, because that is top drawer advice.
Thank you, Joanne. Alex, I'm sure you've got some experiences as well to share.
Yeah, I think I have three short comments on what was already said, and kind of sharing my experience that hopefully will be useful to people. So in terms of preparation for investment, especially very early stage investment, just for fun, we recently reviewed our pitching decks from like 2016, early 2017, when we were just starting. And I think that the very good thing that we found was that we were actually not ashamed of that deck, which means that we did our prep and we were actually knew what we were talking about. But what was very different was when we're looking at the videos of those pitches that we did, the Q&A from early 2017 to today was just like a difference between 0 and 1. Like we got so much better at answering questions. And this is why I think those early stage pitches should really be directed at people who will ask you very good questions, because it's not only about the homework you'll do in the beginning, it's also about things that you don't know people will ask you. If you haven't done fundraising before, you won't even know some of those terms. You won't even know some of those abbreviations. You really don't want to be asking your investor, potential investor, like, what did you mean by or that? This is something that you will learn. So do those early stage events, pitch at people as much as possible, because even if your materials are great, there will probably be questions that you really don't want that investor that you really want on your board to ask and not know the answer to. The second one, which I find quite interesting, I come from Poland originally. I moved to the UK to study at Cambridge. So I'm very well aware of the Polish startup ecosystem. And it's really interesting to me because when I kind of attend some events back in Poland and I see when people talk about, fundraising in the West, so speaking to British investors, speaking to French investors, there is always, it seems like this inflection point for people. And it's almost the same when you talk to founders in the UK. When you go to the US and you have those different challenges, there is just this additional step that people, I think, create in a very fake way. I didn't have to deal with that because I started with our very international team in Cambridge. But I think that this is a very kind of fake issue that people kind of create for themselves. It's like I'm going kind of outside of my geography, outside of my safety zone. I don't think you should be discouraged by that. So this is kind of I guess a point for international people that may be on this call as well. And then finally, the point on people who tell you that your company should be worth whatever. I think that the most important question that you have to ask is, are you actually an investor, or are you like a service provider who is trying to get a 10% on the investment that I'll raise? I think as an early stage founder, you come across so many people who have X capital in the name of their company, but they're actually not investors. They're just trying to get you to investors and then get their whatever 10% on top of what you raise. Be aware of that, because that's usually not useful conversations to have, and you'll probably get very discouraged afterwards.
Thank you very much. I mean, there's some amazing Street Fighter tips, as I would say, in the richness of the conversation. Just want to summarize the three things I think we're taking away for those who are looking to raise. Get the narrative right, reframe things if you need to reframe things. The second is prepare, and we've talked about it all the way from the way you pitch, how you pitch, and then the final, which I am absolutely passionate about, is getting those networks, whether they're allies, supporters, because actually the more voices you have, they're amplifying your business, and your purpose, I think that's really does help, and we've seen that in the market. I'm just going to turn, if that's okay. And Aleksandra, you talked about getting the right people and not feeling that you're missing something, whether it's a skill or anything. If we sort of look at talent or partners, and Emma, you know, your business requires you to work with your customers as partners. Any sort of insights, tips as to how you go about choosing the right partners or even talent for your own business? That would be helpful to have some insight.
Yeah, choosing partners as in choosing customers, or choosing partners as in
Either.
people working with us?
Either.
Well,
we talk about collaborators.
First of all, just so we're clear, I love all customers, so I want to partner with all large enterprises wherever they are in the world. I guess, look, when you're very, very early on in your journey, there are a number of things that can trip you up beyond money, beyond some of the really obvious things. And for me, I work, as you say, in B2B. We service medium to large enterprises. These are companies with huge procurement processes, which sounds like a sort of something you can navigate, but they are a real challenge to get through. If you're a small business, the procurement process of a large company, first of all, can take you 6 to 9 months to get through, to get from a yes to a contract. One of my first early lessons, people said yes to us, and then we had 6, 9, 12-month journeys to actually get a contract over the line. So I guess one of the things about customer partners and customers you work with is, if you can, and everybody says this, but it is true, if you can find a senior sponsor or somebody who can help guide you, or someone looking over the deal, you can at the very least go to somebody and say, I'm a bit stuck, or you can ask for their help getting through procurement, or if it's someone C-suite, you can hope that they've told procurement to please be as helpful as possible. That makes all of the difference at an early stage for a company servicing very large companies. Second thing I would probably say is, you know, when you are a small business and servicing large businesses, in my personal experience, it's very hard to say no when you're being pressured. It's very hard to ask for things that you think are important in contracts if there is seemingly some resistance met from that side. One thing you learn over time, as you do with all elements of sort of growing up and age, is to ask for what you want and to stand reasonably firm. If you're being unreasonable, of course not. But for example, payment terms. You know, that's a really, really simple one that perhaps I can pick and then move on to somebody else. Most of our customers put 90-day payment terms in our contracts. I change it to 30 days, or my team change it to 30 days. And I tend to be the one that has a chat. And I always say to people, you know, we'll compromise, and there's different, you know, it depends on who you're talking to, but we are a small business. You know, we're not able to fully finance the cash flow of a $60 billion company. So what difference does it make to them? So there are things that you can fight for. And I would say as time has gone by, I've become increasingly robust about doing that. So when you say customer partners, and if I think about building relationships with people, it's much easier to get a customer to renew than to find a new customer. It's much easier to have customers you have a warm relationship, and then if something goes wrong, you have someone that you can go to who can be forgiving. Those customers will generally be your advocates, and you probably are going to get a quote better and faster if you've built a relationship. So build relationships. If your customer is someone you don't really know, if it's someone junior, reach out. I have spent my life cold emailing. My dad taught me to knock on doors. I do it every day. I write 2 to 5 cold emails to the C-suite every day. Today, amongst other things, I guessed the email address of Walgreens Boots Alliance CEO Stefano Pessina. 2 out of 5 times, I get a response within 24 hours. So build relationships, build senior relationships, hold on to them tightly.
Very good advice there, Emma. Thank you very much. Joanne, I know that you're an international business, having to build. Any tips and advice from you in terms of, I guess, either partners or even the talent, because you've got people across the world working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we partnered in our global expansion. We partnered with actually your company in Australia, which is really helpful. You have to find a partner that has a shared values, and that you don't have to manage too much, because as Emma said about the size of a small organization, you are literally you're busy, and if you're having to try and manage your partners in the same way, it's quite difficult. But we've been very lucky. So we've literally gone into Australia. We're now working with 3 of the 4 major retail banks on the back of the strength of our partnership with KPMG, because we've been able to provide something that they haven't got. And that's the important thing when you think about partners. Partnerships will work if you are creating and giving them something that they don't have for themselves. You can't swim. You can't swim in a big pond. You've got to have something quite different. So Emma's got something quite different with what she has with Enterprise Alumni. We've got something very different, and you have to have that in order to get partners really excited about what you're offering. They do need managing as well. I think you're going to talk about agility. When you're small and agile, and you have a large organization that's not small and agile, that takes some doing. So it is not without its challenges, but once you have got it cracked, then it's a brilliant way to go into new markets and to explore new territories.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next topic, actually, on agility, if that's okay, in terms of resilience and agility. We talk about it. I think everybody understands what we really mean, but actually from each of you, I'd like to understand what it means to you as individuals. One, because being an entrepreneur is a very lonely journey, and it's something you feel passionate about, but what keeps you going? So maybe, Joanne, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, thank you. I think adaptability is the most important competency of an agile leader. And I think we've seen over the last 12 months how businesses have had to be agile and resilient to cope with the COVID crisis, to cope with the changes that we've all had to make as individuals to our businesses and to our personal lives and to our home lives and all that is entailed. It's been an interesting, I guess, pause for lots of people. If you think about where you, when you're on a hamster wheel and you're constantly going and you're going fast and you're agile and you're resilient and all that, you're constantly going too fast, and then sometimes think about why are you going in the direction you're going in. When something like COVID happens, you've got to stop and think about, well, what do we do now? What will we have to do differently? So a great example would be when COVID happened, the first thing we did was to look and say, cash is king. How are we going to make it through this part of the business challenge? What are we going to do that's different to be able to allow us to get through this period whilst we're working out what will COVID mean to us as a business? You have to be resilient. You've got to look after the people that work for you. There's a lot of talk about mental ability and how the COVID crisis has really brought that to a fore. And so as an employer, you've got to start to think, how can you do some things differently than you did before? And what will you carry on doing when this crisis is over? Because if you're just going to go back to doing the same things again, that doesn't feel the right thing to do. We've got to build back better, and we've got the opportunity to do so. So I think by being agile, being resilient, looking after the mental health of your employees is really fundamental, and looking after our own mental health as well. Actually, first and foremost, we've got to stay sane and happy and in order to be able to provide this service and keep going, because it's being an entrepreneur, being an SME is not easy. As much as it's sometimes it can be sheer terror and sheer pleasure in equal measure in the same week, and you just go, that's how difficult it is. But once you've cracked it, I think it does bear fruits, and it is a great role.
Great, thank you. And just on that, before you go, Joanne, life as an entrepreneur is lonely. So how do you look after yourself?
Well, before COVID, I did quite a lot of traveling. I have a bucket list. I did the first bucket list, and I've got a second bucket list, and I've only got 3 things to do on the second bucket list. And the only thing I'd say about that is, do it while you're young. Don't leave it till you retire, because you never know what's going to happen. So make the most of every day and make time to travel and broaden your horizon. Exercise always helps. I'm doing more of that these days, and having social activity is equally good as well. Can't wait for COVID to be finished, and then we can go back to restaurants. Anyway,
Great. No, thank you very much, Joanne. Aleksandra, can I ask you to pick up from there in terms of what it means for you, and I guess how you look after yourself?
Yeah, I think for especially first-time founders, what I find extremely important in just keeping myself sane is actually having this supporting co-founding team. So I have so much respect for single founders, knowing how much it gives me to just brainstorm ideas or problems or effectively just share responsibility with my co-founders. It's really difficult to I think even put a value on. So that's definitely something that I suppose for anyone who is planning to start an entrepreneurial journey, if you have someone who you believe could be that co-founder, or if you're thinking about starting a business and you are kind of thinking whether it's best to do it by yourself or whether to do it with someone else, I have found it extremely helpful to have co-founders that I can rely on. But I guess it's a kind of double-edged sword, because obviously starting a company with someone can very much go both ways. I've been very lucky, and we've been with my co-founding team, effectively the same one for more than 4 years now, and it's been working okay. But it had its ups and downs, and it's very much like a family, and there are always some issues to resolve. But in general, I think it needs to be a mindful decision. But if you've done, for example, some projects in the past with someone and it worked okay, that's usually a good kind of trying ground for whether it's going to work when you start working on the company with someone. So yeah, definitely that has helped a lot over the past year. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm very much agree with Joanne. Actually, traveling has been very much at the heart of what we're doing, because we do have many international customers. So I always try to just take one day off on top of some business trip, actually trying to see the place, not just go to the office and then get back to the airport. Not happening really right now, but just looking forward to it and thinking what can happen once COVID is done has been very helpful. So yeah, I would actually love to hear from people who have been doing who have been kind of single founders. Pros and cons, very much welcome.
Thanks, Alex. And I think that you're absolutely right. There's a safety net in having other founders with you, and sometimes it works when you've got technical, non-technical founders. There's healthy tension, and that healthy tension is sometimes good because but it's got to be in a safe environment, as you said. When you know each other really well, you take those challenges with the intent with which they're intended, I guess. Talking about single founders, I mean, I know, Addie, you've got others you work with, but do you want to pick that one up first? I'd love to get your thoughts, and then I'll move on to Emma.
Yeah, I think on balance, I would advise in general trying to co-found something. I think the people I see who do it right and find the right person, they really find a lot of solace from that. I think it's really important to be surrounded by challenge and robust but constructive challenge. So for me, one of the greatest differences between a company achieving what they're capable of by year 3 is how strong their board is on year 1. And if you ever talk to people in mid-market private equity, they generally go, "Oh, don't have a board too early." That's because mid-market private equity like to create your board for you later. It is really apparent to me that the difference between having a proper board governance, proper monthly minutes, proper decisions, ratifications, even a veto at early stage makes a massive difference. For me, a founding partnership, having observed a lot, it's like a marriage, which is don't wait till things go wrong before you go and get counselling. Just start having counselling once every 6 months. And I phoned a couple of other companies who are doing, and here's the other thing, problems normally come out the worst when you're doing the best, because that's when people start having bigger visions and questioning what they really want the company to do, or greed gets in the way, and quite normal human behaviours. So I actually phoned another brilliant female founder of ours who's doing brilliantly, just done a great raise. And I just said, look, this is a random thing to say to you because you guys get on so well, but I just need to call this to you now that there will be days where you have tensions just because you get on brilliantly at the moment. Why don't you have this conversation now to say, if we get to a stage where we really disagree on something, what exactly we will do? Who's the person we will call to have a confidential discussion with? Where's our safe place to iron out this relationship? It's like a marriage. So I think that's my sort of first thought on that. Where I think things also go wrong, especially with companies that are successful, we've got a number we might have backed 3 years ago that are doing very, very well. It's quite easy to become echo chambery. So fresh blood on the board. Don't create your whole board overnight. Stage it in, stage it off, roll people in, roll it off. Don't be afraid to have observers who come in one day, just a totally fresh eyes. On the Adelpha board, we bring in a guest chair for every meeting. It's just someone, doesn't matter who it is. Emma Sinclair could do it one day, Bina could do it the next day, FTSE chairman the next day, but it's someone who brings in a totally fresh set of advice. So every time we feel we're on guard and on point, thinking about it and just getting new representations. And I think the other thing, if I skip that back to the first question about energy levels, someone who Emma and I both know talks quite a lot about the kimono. There's a sort of phrase I've always got in my head about founders. You know, as a founder, you're basically always on show. It doesn't matter what you do. Most people are stakeholders in your business somewhere. So inside that kimono, the number of people you really show how you're feeling or what you're thinking or where your fear is incredibly low. And in my case, it's generally not people who are commercially related, but I also label those people. I did a UCLA course years ago on leadership. And one of the things that really landed me there was they talked about creating the board of me, which is kind of like BOARD and BORED. And it's like, these are the 14 functions you need in your life. Who is your primary person? Who's your secondary person? Where do you have gaps? Fill that person. And in those people, you know, I literally have people where I've turned to them and said, I want you to play this part of my life. And definitely on that one, when things are going wrong and I don't tell anyone, you're the person I want to phone. There's actually a person who runs a massive department of a massive corporate company who I just love. And she's the person I phone mostly. I'm like, we're going to have an off. And I clarify the conversation. I was like, the next 7 minutes is off the record. We're never going to discuss it again. This is what's happened. But it's finding a place I can breathe it off, but it has no impact back to my company. And then back to energy levels. I'm a big believer in just understanding your own energy levels. So a good understanding on any one day, whether I'm high or low, or where I am. And I play to those strengths. So when I'm high, or when I'm expecting myself to be sort of above high normal energies, those are the days I do pitches. I can see them coming. I know when they're coming. That's when I do my biggest, most important pitches. That's what, you know, I've got one coming up this week for a $200 million thing. I'm like, I'm waiting for the day when my energy levels are there. And that's when I'm going to make that phone call. And when I'm feeling more reflective, that's when I do my reviews with my team. I'm much more empathetic. I have much more emotional engagement. That's where I review my strategy. And then some days I wake up, like I'm sure everyone does, I'm like, I just can't be bothered to do this at all. And on those days, I just cut myself some slack and I have a bath and I walk on the beach and I go and see my kids, and a bit of routine helps. And I know I should be the person who goes for a run every morning. I'm just not. But I say to myself, if I can get up at 7, walk and see the sea and get back again and have a cup of coffee, like that does it for me. So cut yourself some slack as well, I guess, is the other thing I say. Self-awareness combined with a bit of like self-forgiveness.
Brilliant advice. Self-awareness with a bit of self-forgiveness, because we don't often do that for ourselves. Emma, can I turn to you for your words of wisdom around your resilience and agility? Because, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure wisdom is what I can offer. And if anyone who just logged on and heard Addie talk about when she's high, we were just talking about mental health. I don't want anyone to misquote any of us tomorrow morning, especially with Bina, the new rock star. Look, I mean, I wrote down a couple of words while everyone was talking, in no particular order. There's no one size that fits all. Something that we all know, but it's worth, by the way, and I don't often take my own advice, so I'm going to listen to this while I'm talking. There's no one size fits all about what we should all do in order to stay sane, look after ourselves, do the very best we can. I think, you know, what keeps me going, sometimes I feel like I have no choice, frankly. You know, I have everything invested in my business. I have a lot of people relying on this. I've had many people tell me I take the concept of investors too seriously, and I should work on the basis that I've lost all their money. I have so many founder friends that say this, and honestly, no judgment on anybody else, but that just simply isn't how I can live my life, having taken people's investment. So I guess, you know, how do I look after myself? Badly. I sometimes think, you know, depending on the day you ask me questions, I have different answers, but sometimes I think it's worth saying a few frank things. I've put on weight. I see my friends less. I have high stress levels, in particular around finance constantly, because I started off with this 50-50 and then like an idiot, I decided I should try and keep it up. So finance for me is a constant source of stress, especially because I have a B2B business, which is, you know, it takes a long time to build and customers take a long time to come on side. I guess I balance it out in a number of ways. We all have our own ways. I have been vegan for over 25 years. Until not so long ago, in particular lockdown, I'd say I just didn't drink at all. I was pretty alkali. I think there's ways you can balance out the extreme stress you have in one ways with the sort of extreme relaxation. Lockdown for me has been many things, highs, lows, lots of lows. My parents weren't very well, but actually I live close to my family and I was able to see my family every day. So I guess the cutting yourself some slack is probably the best advice, because I'm terrible at doing that. Quite tired today. Going to have calls till 9:30 p.m. and it's it's not going to change tomorrow. I'm going to make two other points I made notes on. One was ego. So the challenge about sort of co-founders and how we work and everything else. The enemy of everything, I think, is ego. And you can't always change how people around you react. Something I've had to learn over time. Lots of people work with me, lots of investors, co-founder and colleagues. Choose wisely if you're thinking about co-founder, because it is harder than marriage, I think. And my final point is, even if you're listening to all this advice and you feel differently, within reason, I'm sure lots of the things that we're all saying come from years of experience. So I'd like to think that all of us have some accrued wisdom, but we do all take our own path. I was advised not to do the 50-50, which was great advice, because my life would be much easier and I would have much less stress. But I couldn't help myself, so I did it. So we all have to find our own path in some which way.
Thank you for that honest reflection, Emma. We are sort of coming to the close of the panel, and there will be Q&A. I know our panelists have already been on the Q&A to answer the questions, but I want to pick one question out that's come from a very good friend of mine, actually, Tanya. Tanya's question is, and I think actually Ali and Alex, you've already started to answer it. The question is, investors ask, what you mentioned questions investors ask that may take you by surprise. Could you just share one example? Maybe if we just run around. And Addie and Alex, you've got a challenge to find another one now. So start with Joanne.
Sorry, the questions that investors ask?
Yeah, so just one thing that they ask you that's just been strange or taken you by surprise.
Oh, questions are, just bear with me 1 second. I'll just find I've just been asked for ones today. So what do they ask you?
Or I can wade in and you can have a think.
Go ahead, Emma. Yeah.
Teamwork.
I mean, I'm going to give a couple, actually. On the one hand, I've been asked, would you like to come back to my hotel room? That was definitely one that I didn't enjoy. I think everybody's had that. And on the other hand, you haven't. Yes, I mean, that was most of us have got some kind of war story somewhere. And I guess other questions, it's very hard to think about your exit. And that's an uncomfortable question, but it's probably worth throwing out right now. It's a really hard and difficult one at the beginning. I'm quite honest, straight to the point, and don't like bullshit. So when someone asked me about my exit at the beginning, I was just like, well, I can't. And I used to be an investment banker, so I'm very proficient in numbers and modeling. And I just used to think to myself, it's just a ridiculous question. I can't give an even remotely honest answer because I literally have no idea. But there are some questions that are pretty tough, where sometimes what people want to hear is, have you thought about something? How do you think about it? How did you come to that conclusion? What sort of direction are you going in? So sometimes when people ask you questions, don't always worry about giving the right answer. But sometimes questions where philosophically I feel like I can't give an honest answer are ones that I find quite difficult.
Thank you, Emma. Addie, shall I move over to you for next?
Thanks. Before I go on that, there's a question on the main chat saying, are we okay if someone takes a screenshot to share on personal social media? I am. Is everyone else okay with that?
Yep.
I already shared one, so
take that as a yes, but thanks for asking. Okay, so I think the exit question is the one that really divides women, female founders, especially early stages. I'd actually forgotten, because we don't do so much in super early stage, but I'd forgotten it's the one that I used to really train women on, especially. Say they will ask this, you might as well just knock it on the head and here's your answer. So apart from what the question is, why don't I just give a potential model answer on this situation as well? So if I think of let's think of the female-led SaaS company we did last week. It just says, whenever they ask exit, it's growth. Where basically they're saying, how much money might I make and when might I get it back? And you don't need to forecast this stuff. And it's never a prediction. It's just saying, tell me how to think about this. So in this case, her answer was, we're currently here. These are the 5 drives we get. Our base case takes us to this revenue number or this EBITDA number in 2023. We think the key point, there's been over $230 million of transaction value in this space in the last 2 years. There's been over $1 billion of transaction in the space in the last 12 years or 7 years. We think the key number to get to is over 7,000 units, and we're going to be there at the end of this year. So we are already in play. We're already getting approaches and strategic approaches, but we think we're in the absolute sweet spot from about 3 months onwards. That said, it'd be silly to burn out too early. And in terms of who buys us, so the guys who've already approached us fit into this category. So classically, you'll say, obviously there's big tech. There's normally, if you're a SaaS business, it's a financial buyer, private equity. I personally don't normally go down the IPO route, but people like Emma cut that path better than I do. Strategic buyers upstream and downstream from you, people who might take you off. Who's going to take you off just to take market share? Who's going to take you off to try and shut you up? Who's going to take you off for a strategic fit for their company? You need 3 really to give it out. And then the other point I always make in this is, if the question you're actually asking is how you get your money back, I suspect you're getting it back through secondary liquidity. So my perspective is, you tell me more about yourself and tell me about what kind of returns you're looking for, what kind of time frame, and we'll talk about how we find you secondary liquidity at that point in time with that kind of return. Because that's all they're asking. Now, like when you're interviewed, when you go to Cambridge, what actually matters is not so much what you say, it's how you say it. So whatever you do, just don't get flummoxed by it. Just, put your big girl's pants on, look them in the eye, lower your voice, speak slowly and confidently, and say, there are 3 ways I think about this, which is A, B, and C. And it doesn't matter if you say, the first way is that dogs are yellow, the second way is that cats are red, and the third way is that the sky is hypercoloured. They'll just think, yeah, that felt sensible, and they'll move on with their day. So that's kind of my thinking around that.
Thank you, Addie. Can I come back to you, Joanne, before we move on to Alex?
Yeah, I think they've nailed it around the exit. It's all about, what do you want to do? How long are you in it for now? And I find myself often hesitating with that, because I know what answer I want to give. And sometimes I give depending on who's in front of me, I'll be very honest. And then sometimes I'll say, what I think they want to hear. And actually I should just always go with the honesty piece, because that's my direction of travel. So why wouldn't I be completely honest about it? I just sometimes think it's not what they want to hear. They want to hear something completely different. So yeah, get your exit story right and stick with the truth, because actually you're the driver of the business. You're the one who will make it happen. So be honest.
Thank you, Joanne. And Alex?
Yeah, I think that Addie kind of mentioned that already. I started thinking about Cambridge interviews straight away when we started talking about this, because there really isn't a bad answer as long as you kind of can just say something that makes sense and is related to your business. But I guess kind of just to add to it, what I usually find as well is that there will probably, especially on bigger investment committees, will be this one person that really wants to ask some question, but probably all the questions were already answered in the pitch or during the Q&A session. I got the most random question about some type of insurance, whether we have it, blah, blah, blah. And on one hand, I probably wanted to know that as a COO, but on the other hand, you always want to kind of double check. So I think getting ready for, saying, this is what we have, I'll double check, get back to you. This is also an okay answer. If you don't know, just say you don't know. And you can always get back to them. But surprise, surprise, they'll usually never really ask that question again. They just kind of wanted to catch you on the spot.
Yeah, if I could add on that, Bina, there's 2 things. I remember sort of day 1 training at Goldman Sachs, three things they taught us on day 1 that have kind of stuck with me for the whole of my career. The first is to say, what they said then was, our 3 biggest assets are our people, our financial assets, and our reputation. Of all those 3 things, the most valuable is your reputation, because it takes the longest to build, it's the quickest to cut. So whether you're looking at partnerships, clients, anything, and certainly answers and interview questions, don't say anything that does you reputational damage. The second is that they made us train and practice as sort of interns and then graduates, was the answer that says, I don't know the answer to that, I'm going to go away and get you the answer and come back. So much better than a BS answer, and an investor going, that's cool, I really appreciate the fact you didn't talk out your bum on that. And also you're already showing the ability to listen, respond, learn, come back. And it gives the opportunity then to go away, find the answer, send an email afterwards saying, here's my quick execution on that question you asked, or I'm gonna go away and think about this more and come back to you, here's a first response. And the third thing they said, which doesn't relate to this question, but it's quite good advice for founders, I think, is don't ever put something on the to-do list if you can do it immediately. And something we just culturally do at Adelpha is, anything that comes in that can be responded to within 2 minutes and done and closed gets done, which I just think is quite good advice, given that all founders are constantly being judged on how well they execute.
Great bits of advice there. Thank you very much. I'm going to move to the Q&A. I've got some questions in here that we need to just address. So one of them is, can you please advise on any M&A, financial analysis, learning, training for early entrepreneurs? So I don't know if any of you have got any ideas, or you're just maybe whizzes with your numbers, or maybe because you know me. But no, seriously, are you aware of anything, advice in terms of how you got kind of comfortable with those sorts of things?
I don't entirely understand the sort of point of
So
the
can you
question,
please,
driver.
yeah, so it's basically as for early sort of young, earlier stage entrepreneurs, is there training or advice on M&A or financial analysis learnings, I guess?
Yeah, I
programs.
mean,
yeah.
One of the things that I would say is that when I started I'm really not that old, but when I started my first business and when I started in investment banking as the only graduate that had no financial training, there were no online courses, connect with people remotely, sign up for a webinar. There just was none of that. There were no women's sections in newspapers. There was no talk about diversity. And so now if anyone says, that they can't find a way to learn about something or get ahead or ask questions, I am often a little bit suspicious of that, because there are a million ways to learn. There's so much resource online to read. There are so many webinars you can participate in and ask questions. There's when we all get back to moving around a bit, there's can I have 15 minutes? I would say, how much M&A does one really need to think about? Probably financial discipline is very important. How to build numbers is very important. But if it's not your skill and you're brilliant and you've got a fantastic idea, then I know that you can't afford everything day one, but that just points to you're going to need an FD or a financial controller or somebody that can do that for you. And there are also people you can work with who can help build your financial models. If you're no good at that, probably, if you're very ambitious, probably don't do it, because it's quite hard to fake understanding numbers to people that understand numbers. So know what you're good at, I'd say. And if you do need to get that learning, do. But no one expects you to go into a meeting and start to talk about, M&A multiples early on. I'm a former investment banker. If someone asked me that now and I wasn't, I think I'd probably be comfortable enough to say, I have no experience in that world, but I'm getting to know this accounting firm or this M&A firm, or one of my investors is at a bank, or one of my investors is in private equity, and I'm starting to learn about it and have these things on my horizon. We can't all know everything. And so I don't know if that's the answer I was looking for, but that's mine.
Well, thanks, Emma, because I remember the very first time I met you, which is probably about 5 years ago now. I remember you were talking about your journey when you had built your first business that you then IPO'd, and you were very, very clear that, recognize what you don't know. And I think you absolutely said, if you don't really, get yourself a proper finance person. And now when you're growing a business, it's not something that's necessarily a choice to have, but actually just surrounding yourself with people, or actually having access to somebody that actually understands the numbers, if you're not necessarily that way inclined, is actually really helpful. And I guess that comes back to some of the questions that actually are still on here, which are around how do you find your co-founders? How do you get that complement of skills? So there are two questions, and I know Emma's starting to type into one of them. One is, how do you find your co-founders, and what's your advice about co-founding with friends? Coming back to the advice you Addie, I think you and Emma have said, that it is really hard. Alex, you've said it as well. There's always a lot of healthy tension in that. Any advice you guys have got? Alex, maybe I can start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to start. I think my first super obvious advice is going to be that for, I guess, my 4 years at Cambridge, I totally underestimated how different environment the university is from the real life. So if you're thinking about, looking for co-founders, getting to know people who may have similar interests, the university is the place to do it. Do not postpone it until you get your first job and you'll think, yeah, I'll start the graduate scheme, I'll start thinking about it then. I think I was really lucky to get that time at Judge after doing my BA in Cambridge as well, to actually have that mindset and have that space to look for projects that were interesting, to look for people who I found were kind of like-minded as well. I think it would be very difficult for me to do it had I not started my business when still at the university. So I think do not underestimate it, make the most out of your time. I remember people saying that all the time and thinking obviously, why does everyone keep saying that? But that's really true. Think about what are the other societies, projects you can kind of get involved in, get to know people. Maybe you already have an idea, so use that as a platform to talk to people about that idea. Maybe you will find a co-founder amongst those people. I really think that my access to people in general has shrunk a lot since I left the university. So I would just say dig into that resource, because it's amazing and really difficult to replicate.
Great, thank you, Alex. Anybody else got anything to add there? I'll move on to the next question. We've got lots of questions here. Can I move on? Oh, actually, no, this is a similar one. This is about co-founding with friends. So I think we've picked that up. I'm conscious that we're beginning to come to the end, and I don't think there are any more questions, because you guys have been super efficient at answering the questions online. So all the attendees can see all the answers and all the rich wisdom coming through. So before I close, I just want to summarize a couple of things that I've taken from this, and then I want to do a little bit of a quick fire round, if that's possible. I think so that what I think we've taken away as an entrepreneur, the journey can take many forms, but what we do know is it has to start with something that only you can do, or only you believe something that you only believe that you can do. And the other thing that I think comes with that is really being clear about what that journey might feel like, recognizing that it isn't always easy, and sometimes it's easier to chunk it up. And I think Joanne talked about the 3-month goal, the 3-year perspective. Somebody else talked about the 5-year installments. Addie, you did. And recognizing this is a series of steps as opposed to one long journey. I suspect if we go back 20 years ago, Joanne, you may not be able to have articulated then where you are today. And same for you, Emma, when you started off your first business. So I think the key is here is focus on the next goal. But what we're also hearing is it's never too late to start, right? Never too late to start thinking about money, even if you've just raised your first bit of money. Always think ahead, always have to look one eye on the future. What I've also heard here is about how you look after yourselves as entrepreneurs. It's an extremely, extremely lonely place to be. And I work with so many amazing entrepreneurs. And when I sit down with them, the very first thing they'll often do is just offload how burdensome they feel, because they have the well-being of their employees. They've got the need to create and grow business in order to create the cash flows to pay for all the development, to pay for running costs. So there is it's an extremely lonely journey. And the one thing that most people again and again raise is some of the tensions they may have, whether it's co-founders, whether it's fellow employees. So just, it's always there. So it comes back to the point that Addie made, which was around the kimono. Have that little group of people, your personal boardroom that you go to when you need that support and moral support. So I think I've captured most things there. But I wanted to just summarize and before we close off with a bit of a quick fire. Well, it doesn't have to be quick fire. You're all advocates of entrepreneurship. You're incredible role models, all of you. What one piece of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about starting a business? You guys have really done amazingly well with your own businesses, and you shared your journey. If you go back to the very beginning, what is the one piece of advice you might give? And maybe Addie, could I start with you, please?
I am certain that other people on this panel will have better answers than this. There's a really senior woman who's about to leave her really high profile job to set something up. And she just gave me a call last week to tell me about it. My advice to her, for what it's worth, was, she's a Cambridge alumni as well. I said to her, I was like, when you resign, my best advice was, do not tell anyone what you're going to do. Because you currently have the golden CV. If you phone anyone, they pick up the phone to you, and then they'll spend the next week telling everyone they've spoken to you. If you resign and tell them what you're about to do, and it's as of yet unproven, that street cred and credibility will basically evaporate. It's like a sort of bottled juice, and it's gone. If you don't tell everyone what you're going to do, you will be left alone and quietly to go and do it without feeling pressure and peering eyes. And then when you're ready to come through, you will do so. And you can still make those calls you were going to make now, but you'll use them at the point where you can use them in your business. So I think my first advice is, I wouldn't go around announcing it loud and proud. I would just sit down quietly, get it done, get it to the point of credibility and sensibleness, and then let people know. My personal view of my own business is I try not to go around broadcasting about it, and I want to wait till someone's heard about it going, how come we haven't done anything yet? That's the sort of the approach I want. The second thing is and sort of related to that, is de-risk it. Measure twice and cut once. There's a point in a business where you've launched it where you are really quite aggressively committed. But there's a point before that where you're not. So do as much as you can before you get to that point. There's a lot, in my case with Adelpha, we did 2 transactions before we'd incorporated for no fees to see if I was any good at it. Did I even enjoy it? Is this fun? Am I any good at it? What are the answers? But what I didn't do is go and incorporate, set up a brand, announce it, contract myself. So I was then on an obligation and all the rest of the things. You can normally test the water quite aggressively before you really are committed to the journey. Maybe everyone else disagrees with that, and I'm sure the others have much more interesting things to say.
The beauty for entrepreneurship, Addie, is that we don't always have to agree with each other.
Thank
so
you, Bina.
Alex, maybe I can turn to you next.
Yeah, I find it really hard because, as I said, I still feel like some of those decisions that I made related to becoming an entrepreneur, they really feel like I was making them yesterday. But I think that especially if you're starting kind of straight away after uni, like I did, I think it's important to kind of be ready to have that ramp up, that the curve is much steeper when you're starting your entrepreneurial journey straight away after uni. There are so many things on the finance, on the tech, in the industry that you just know you will not know, and you'll need to look for advice. So I think, especially, for me as a Cambridge grad, you're kind of used to, being in kind of your top 1% in high school, at uni, and then you kind of get into your entrepreneurial journey, and it's not like things are prescribed for you anymore. Like, you have to look for answers, and you have to also be way more ready for failure, because entrepreneurial journey is, I think, still 90% about failure than success. So I guess the most important advice is, you'll probably, if you really want to do it, you're most likely going to do it more than once. And sometimes it will be more successful, sometimes it will not be very successful. And I think this is something that we're getting to accept amongst the entrepreneurs in general. It's okay to fail, but it's also okay to ask for advice, especially if you start very early.
Thank you, Alex, for that. That's really helpful. Emma, what's your bit of advice from when you started your first business?
Whether it's first or any other, I guess, look, no one size fits all. To everyone's point about what they feel is the way to do this or what worked for them, we all have our reasons. I think 2 things I'll share. Number one, I think that building a business is kind of like building a house extension. It costs more money, takes longer, is harder, and will go wrong far more times than you think. There will be mess everywhere. So think long and hard. So I certainly am an advocate for this, but also I'm tired. And it's quite easy sometimes to look at what other people are doing, think about where you are in your life, have you achieved what you wanted? So it is tough and rough. If you can start well funded, that's clearly the way to go as far as I'm concerned. If I successfully exit EnterpriseAlumni, if I was to ever do anything again, I'm literally never doing anything again without high quality talent from day one and plenty of cash in the bank. That is where that's my definitive position. The second thing I'd say is, in terms of it being hard and just thinking about, maybe sharing a bit of personal experiences. A while ago, about just over a year ago, nothing to do with COVID, I just couldn't do panels. I felt like I wasn't successful. There were so many things that were a challenge behind closed doors. I actually just didn't have it in me to hear people say, you're a successful entrepreneur, share some news, tell us some stuff, you know how it's done. I wasn't feeling that way. So, I was listening to Joanne and Addie talk about sort of 5-year plans and 3-year plans. I have none of this. I've never actually had any training. I've never been on an MBA. Maybe it would do me some good. I'm not very good at listening to anybody, but I guess this too shall pass, which is a sort of Churchillian phrase, which is often sort of cited to me, is it is absolutely true. There are ebbs and flows, highs and lows. Sometimes I have 7 highs and lows in a day, which is pretty exhausting. So think very hard, think very fast. And to anyone thinking, if I had some money that I'd do it again, I've got to be honest with you. I think I just want to have pets. I want to cook. I want to have manicures. I want to, I don't know, I want to go to the spa. I want to go crazy funding other women. I mean, I'm going to be the easiest person to hit up for a check if I successfully exit. It's going to be embarrassing. People are just going to have to sort of just ask me and be female, and the answer will be yes. So, you know, here's hoping that some of the people on this call are the future PayPal mafia S's, and we can start a kind of, you know, network that funds all of the women that we know.
Thank you for that offer there, Emma.
I got a while though, so if anyone's listening, don't hit me up yet. I've got a lot of work to do.
And Joanne, what's the one thing you would share?
Hard to follow that, really, isn't it? I guess I would say start early, earlier than I did, and fail fast. Be proud of failing, because actually we don't celebrate failure here in the UK. We do it in the US, but we don't here. And so fail as fast as you can. Learn from your experiences and your mistakes, and then repeat it. Do it again. Obviously not the mistakes, but just start it again. Keep doing it until you get it right, because it is practice, and practice will make perfect, and you will get there. But it does take hard work. It's hard. It's very hard work. And I would certainly say spend as much as you possibly can. And I haven't always done this, by the way, on as much as top draw talent that you can possibly afford, because it will pay back dividends, and honestly, you will get it back in spades. So, but do try, and I'm sure everybody here on the panel will be delighted to answer any other questions that anybody would have about raising funds or starting their businesses, or but just do it, because we need more people like you.
Thank you, Joanne. And the very final thing, I think we're running out of time now. So I'm going to give you like literally 10 seconds. We're all learning. And this is one thing that I'm learning from you guys, that you're all still learning. What's the one thing that you've learned today? Addie, go quick.
Come back to me.
That is the first time that Addie Pinkster has been speechless. Emma. Can't hear you.
I've learned, well, first of all, I've learned to press unmute, mute when I need to speak. That's the first thing I just learned. I've learned that it really helps if you take frozen food out of the freezer at lunchtime, because then when you have lots of calls and you need to put it in the oven, that it's going to be defrosted and ready, and you don't have to wait an hour to eat. That's what I learned before this call, because I'm starving because all of my food is frozen.
Thank you, Emma. Joanne.
I've learned that I definitely need a co-founder.
Alex.
I think I'll be taking negative feedback with a bigger smile, for sure.
And Addie.
I reminded myself today that I majorly cock stuff up sometimes. Sorry, mess stuff up sometimes. And we've got a company that's had a bit of a footfall, and I thought they were brilliant at modelling and brilliant at governance because of basically bias in my interpretation. And I realised that I didn't dig hard enough in the first place, and that doesn't help anyone. So I just reminded myself.
You sound like a person that digs very hard, Addie. I'd be very scared to do business with you, so I don't believe you didn't dig hard.
Emma, I'm a pussycat. Come and knock
very
on
scared.
my door.
Yeah.
I reminded myself that I majorly forget things I thought I knew and make mistakes quite a lot.
And on that note, we all make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I'm going to hand over to Claire, who will just close this out. And before we do that, I think we're going to do a quick survey. So thank you. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Addie.